Awesome. Hey, Sham.
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, super. Amazing.
Great.
You're looking fabulous.
Thank you, as you, and I love your background.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, trying little things to remember every day. Be nice. Be a GC. Hey, Sham. So obviously you are an incredible woman and very, very talented. I'm very happy to have you on here today. I've known you
Thank
for a
you.
long time. But apart from you being a very good friend of mine, I think you're one of the better and more experienced social media community managers and I guess community builders that I've seen. You're just doing a little bit here and there,
Yeah, definitely.
eh?
And I guess what I specialize in particularly is building meaningful connection through
Yeah,
communication. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today and just feel free to jump in whenever
awesome.
you feel.
Well, Sham, do you want to start off maybe just giving a bit of your background and what you've been doing to date and kind of what your experience is? People know that you've got the creds.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started off agency side, and I fell into social media accidentally. It was a
Yeah,
very long time ago. Social media was just sort of like new, it was popping up. And so I was kind of placed there because no one else really had the time or energy to focus on social. And I really loved playing in that space. It
yeah.
was new, it was exciting, and I had a lot of scope to do things that I wasn't allowed to do in more traditional media marketplaces. So it was really exciting, and I started looking at where I could really develop my skills um, in terms of how I communicate with people solely in a digital space. So I actually moved to Melbourne to work specifically in e-commerce as a digital copywriter. So my background is in PR, then digital copywriting, and then solely community management and social media management. So I've been doing that for the past 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy space. I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of change and a lot of, I
Definitely.
guess, yeah. And I think that's something I want to go over with you today is the fact that these wonderful channels that we use day to day don't
Yeah.
they don't they're not stagnant. You've got to keep changing and adapting, and the ways that you engage with people as well is so much. There's so many new tools and ways of doing that. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. All right. Cool. So where do you want to kick off today, Sham? I think I'll let you lead this because you're the expert here.
Yeah, cool. I mean, absolutely, you're correct. Things are always changing. So you've got to be
Yeah.
like on the ball game all the time. But there are some things that remain really fundamental in terms of how we communicate and how we
Yeah.
connect with people. So building meaningful connection requires you or your brand or your service to acknowledge that audiences are comprised of people, and the people respond positively to the language of empathy. So when you think
Mm.
about your most successful and long lasting relationships, you'll find that empathy is a key tenet of every single one of them. And if you think about your closest friends and family members and think about how you interact with them, especially in uncertain times where there are multitudes of stresses impacting their ability to cognize the present moment, there's a level of understanding that you undertake as a trusted resource and connection.
Yeah.
And you communicate with knowledge. And when you don't have that knowledge to be the reliable source that they've grown to trust through time and through consistent effort, you simply listen, you hear them out. And the replication of that dynamic shouldn't be lost on potential customers or existing ones, especially in the context of building upon and maintaining a community. Um, so a relationship exists there, and not necessarily in the traditional sense of an intimate relationship, but it reflects those that exist in the real world. So the knowledge, the relevant memes, the laughs, the data-backed information, the context in which you speak to your audience, everything you provide and the platform that you play in is an investment in the quality of your audience and ultimately the relationship that you have between you. So social media specifically allows you to create these experiences that feel relevant to people on a personal level. And that authenticity is valued in a space where it's largely the consumer who guides trends, conversations, and of course, where
That's
they
it.
ultimately spend their hard-earned money.
Absolutely. And Sham, just on that, I totally agree. And I think where
Yeah.
brands go so wrong is that they put themselves first and they don't look into the eye or they don't listen to people online. The thing I love about social is that
Mm,
it's like a live breathing customer research tool, right? So you can have people giving you feedback and comments and things, but if you're not open to having that two-way conversation or actually taking information on board, then you're just gonna look like a dickhead.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't want to be talked at. Like if you're sitting with someone, all they're doing is talking about themselves, you tune out. You're kind of like, I don't want to be in this situation again.
How many dates have we had like that, Shamim? Jesus. But it's the same principle, right? If you're egotistical as a brand, or if you're egotistical, or you're just being arrogant, it's arrogance, right? So if you're just sitting there going me, you switch off. And you said it before, having empathy, and actually, taking on what a community or even just individual is going through in this, and especially at the moment. It's crazy.
Exactly. So storytelling is contextually, that is contextually relevant, will draw people in as opposed to talking at them, and can make people feel like the message is solely for them.
Yeah.
So everyone at some point has read a story that has resonated really deeply, like it's left a lasting impression. And for many of us, those stories have been consumed in the digital space. And those are always the stories in which we are able to empathize with the storyteller. So this is where I want to talk to the impact of proactive cut through and concise messaging.
So awesome, Shan. And just on that too, from a storytelling point of view, I think it's about building that rapport, right? And if you just go out there and you just start going, buy my product, like, fuck, it doesn't add any value. And this is where the messaging kind of thing comes in as well. So yeah, completely love what you're saying there. I totally agree.
Yeah. The impact of proactive cut through or concise, consistent messaging works with the same effectiveness as positive storytelling. So when we're faced with repetitive detractors or with misinformation in the context of a relationship, we'll respond to that with an educated and informed response. So offering bespoke responsive communication is a craft that you hone through time, through trial, through error, and through the analysis of data. And I'll talk to these in a little bit more detail later. But I want to reiterate what you just said before. We're at a really interesting time in history where we're living in two worlds more so than ever before.
Another bloody dimension, mate. It's insane, especially for you in Melbourne. All right.
Yeah, so we're living in the physical, and for some of us who are in these extended lockdown periods, and more increasingly than ever before, we're living in the digital world. We're interacting, browsing, reading, consuming. Some of you are loving in the space if you're doing a long distance relationship. So meaningful messages and interactions are hugely impactful. And while some people have used this time to scale back and disconnect, other people are increasingly exposed to misinformation on a mass scale. So fear and mistrust are really guiding conversations around responses to communal efforts in health. So I've seen doctors start to employ the language of empathy, which is really interesting and a little bit different, because we always sort of see them as being, clinical and even cold. But the act of listening and sharing on Facebook is something that I've seen in the health profession, and that's really cool too. So there's of course pushback, but these conversations that I've seen are being executed in a way that mirrors conversations that you'd have with family and friends. And I know that this is an e-commerce page, but sales existing in a silo aren't really my area of expertise, but the selling of ideas is where I sort of come into the piece. And so when I think about how I do that, is that I foster empathy into the technology that we've created to ensure that we establish the success of the communities that we want to build. Absolutely. And if we neglect this, we risk losing touch with the entire reason these networks were created and why they've gained such traction, because they're used to bridge time and space divides and to allow us to engage with our loved ones and with like-minded people with ease.
Shay, can I just on that too? And we were saying to a lot of our clients when the first kind of COVID thing hit, lockdown hit, was, people, you said that before, people were driven by fear. Excuse me. And basically what we were saying to our clients was, this is the time you need to be in front of people. And even if you don't have anything to sell, be the brand or the friend effectively, add value, give them reassurance. Even, it's just making sure that they see you and have presence, as well as the fact that we've got an unprecedented time of people being on devices and actually on social media. Yeah. Like it's just a no-brainer. But yeah, I really agree with you on what you're saying there. And you're right. You built these communities, and don't let, at the toughest time, you can't just let people go by the wayside. It's
absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about mitigating crisis.
Oh, yes.
Because this
When
is
it
really
goes
important.
wrong, and this goes wrong, quite often.
And look, it can go really, really wrong. We've all been there.
We sure have.
So
Yeah.
what I like to do, what I like to do is be prepared as best I can. So the best thing you can do is listen. Of course, there are some industry benchmark tools that will assist you in doing that, but I want to talk to how you can do this on a budget, because not everyone has the investment to be able to uptake on Salesforce's Sprout.
Do you want to just maybe explain what social listening is for those
Yeah,
that might
sure.
not know?
So social listening can be carried out via a variety of tools. So there are platforms like Sprout Social, or there is Salesforce's Social Studio that used to be Radian 6. There are a variety of others, but they cost you a pretty penny. And what these do is they allow you to listen to conversations pertaining to topics that are related to your brand, or specifically in regards to your brand, and not necessarily in the channels that you play on. So these can be anywhere in the web. They can be really random news forums, they can be Reddit, absolutely anywhere. If you're seeing a spike in certain complaints or conversation topics, you can actually find the source of those if you have listening tools. But I understand that a lot of us are working with startups, or, we're a one-man band. So I want to talk about how you can listen without employing these really expensive tools.
Guys, this is so important, this stuff. And even so, like, there's obviously what Sham's talking about from if someone's gone and made a complaint, or there's a big issue going on outside of a platform you know of, they're also super, super, super powerful for research and development, to understand what people are doing, the language they're using, the kind of products they're actually engaging with, or they want to find out about. So it's just got so much value. So thanks for bringing this up, Sham, and let's find out how you do it.
Yeah, so the first thing to do is lay the rules. This is more specific to Facebook, but it's really important that you set the standard for how you expect your audience to engage with you, with each other. And it can be as simple as, writing out house rules and getting a lawyer to check over them, to check that you and your members understand your responsibilities, because no one wants to pay a defamation fine.
No.
You can Google recent things that have happened in local forums in Australia.
Yeah.
I think the last fine was around 25,000. So we're not talking small numbers. And a lot of these laws haven't caught up with the digital space. So while some of these groups may only have a few thousand members, they still carry the same penalties as if a name was published on, the front page of a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
So house rules are really important. A fun one, employing a really extensive list of blacklist words. So this is one that I quite enjoy. But what you can do is sit with your mates and come up with every obscene word that you can think of, and make sure that anyone who types that word onto your Facebook page, the comment is automatically hidden. That's really important. It's actually so much fun.
Yeah, completely. That's a good Zoom wine game, I think.
Absolutely.
I have to do it next week.
Yeah, totally.
But guys, and you can just do that in the back end of the page settings, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's really easy, straightforward to do. And the thing to remember as well is that we live in this world that's inextricably connected. So this means that everything has the potential to impact you. Even if you can't find a direct correlation, people can, and they will, draw the most tenuous links. So another thing you can do is get a yearly subscription to an SEO keyword research tool. So some off the top of my head, Mangles, Answer the Public, or Moz, and you'll pay around $1,500 annually for one of those subscriptions. These are super user friendly, and they give you a good insight into what people are searching for online in regards to your brand, in regards to your competitors, or more broadly, in regards to the services you provide. So you can actually look at the questions that people are asking around your services, around your brand, and around topics pertaining to what you do. So you can use this data to create purposeful and well-researched content for your social channels, and to preempt potential queries people might have around your brand, products, or services.
Yeah, and Shab, can I just jump on that, guys? And that's also from a marketing perspective, and product development and e-com. So if you're trying to understand the kind of the language people are using to describe something new on the market, or basically if there is new trends coming up and you want to bring in new products into your store, this is not just about content. This has so many different iterations. Again, it's data and utilizing it to be able to tell the right stories and communicates that you're actually connecting, as you're talking about. But then obviously from a business perspective, making sure that you're bringing on the right products, you're actually using the right terms, and then obviously from an SEO perspective, there's a whole lot of benefits as well. So this isn't a light thing. It's got so much information within it.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential. And it's not a huge investment, like it's not going to break the bank. So highly recommend.
No, absolutely.
Following on from that is building an extensive Q&A framework. So this is my area of expertise. This doesn't necessarily mean copy and paste responses, but what it does give you is a singular source of truth and a place to consistently build upon the knowledge base that you have. So I'll usually create my framework documents in Google or Excel spreadsheets, and I'll use the tabs at the base to separate out topics. And I oftentimes build these frameworks in conjunction with a range of stakeholders in the business that I'm working for, whether it's procurement, sales, brand teams, marketing, corporate comms, to make sure that everything is in line with the messaging that they're giving out. It's a really good idea to have that sort of as a backup plan. But really importantly and free is to stay on top of what is happening in the news. The rampant rise in tabloid journalism and clickbait press releases disguised as articles mean that conversation topics can oftentimes be guided by what's trending in the media landscape, and this can be hugely political. And I say that from having listening tools and looking at the source of a lot of topics. So again, using tools like Social Studio to find the original source of something that's trending can be a huge learning. And not everyone has the capacity to be able to do that. So again, look for spikes or trends in conversation topics on your pages and on competitor pages. Join niche groups with high member counts on Facebook or Reddit or whatever other platform you're aware of. And don't discount what you might view as fringe or radical opinions, irrespective of your personal opinions on a matter. So these groups can play on people's fears or emotions, and they can be highly mobilized when they want to be. So for example, I have a very Middle Eastern name, but I work with food brands. So there was a time where I was following every boycott halal in Australia Facebook page that I could find. So it was like, Shamim Aslani has joined boycott halal in Australia. So my family were probably like, what is going on?
Oh my God.
And then I started joining the recommended pages. So like Patriot pages where member profile pictures are all Holden pics or Australian flags. But the insights that I gathered from following those groups allowed me to preempt inundations or spikes of abusive complaints around halal certification, terrorism, and country of origin complaints on a variety of our food brands. And conversely as well, like I was able to see when we were going to receive positive feedback in regards to our brands that weren't halal certified.
How did you feel about that, doing that? Like, how do you manage to distance the emotion on that stuff? Because it must be really hard. This is why I'm not a community manager, because if someone did something, obviously with kindness and love, I would respect their opinions, but there's a line, babe.
Oh, no, absolutely. And look, I just didn't engage. I looked at it as data collection. So this was risk mitigation for me. I never interacted with anyone on there. I never liked or shared anything, obviously. But I viewed it as, this is data that I need to collect.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. A really important thing is if someone annoys you or a customer complains, you've got to keep that mentality that unfortunately the customer is always right in a sense, right? Don't lose it and go away. Remember that there was that one, it was a restaurant in the States and
everyone has done it.
I know. And it was so bad. And they just went on and started ripping to shreds these people. You look like an idiot. You actually do, and it really damages your brand. So don't do that.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't recommend doing that.
No,
and even doing it from your personal device can be really dangerous, because sometimes it'll flip to a brand device. And
I know.
I'm not going to say I'm above that because it's happened to me.
Yeah, I've done it too. Like gone to when I used to manage Twitter accounts back in the day, and I had
it happened to me on Twitter too.
Yeah. Oh my God, and it was a pretty big corporate brand, and I posted something that should have been on my personal page, and that was fun. Anyway, so always double check what you're posting on what platform.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, follow social accounts that inspire you, even if they're not relevant to you, your
Yeah.
services or your business. So they'll provide you with learnings that can and will translate to how you want to speak to your audiences. So some of the accounts that I follow that really don't have anything to do with some of the clients that I work for or the company that I work for are My Defining Moment, who is a therapist. She posts really relatable memes. Ailey Jolie is also a therapist. They are both on Instagram.
Yeah.
Nadia Fouch is a nutritionist. She is based in Australia. The two previous accounts I mentioned were based in the US.
Mhm.
And she has a really cool understanding of the framework in which people are operating. So she talks about nutrition from a sociological perspective, which is really interesting and
Mhm.
different. And then on Facebook, we've got Dr. Sarah Marzuk and Dr. Rawari Taunui. So they're quite new players in the social space, but I'm really loving the information that they're providing with a level of empathy that I haven't really seen from the medical profession before. And of course, everyone's favorite, Humans of New York. So
Yeah.
most of these accounts contextualize the framework in which they operate. So they recognize that systems of oppression exist and they speak to the sociological constructs in which their audiences operate and how those constructs impact people's understandings, feelings, and ultimately their perceptions. So most of these accounts speak with data-backed or quantitative knowledge. And when they don't, they employ qualitative data. And they all communicate with empathy and understanding. But to sort of recap all of this, one of the most truly empathetic actions you can offer someone is to listen. Listen to what people are saying when they talk to topics relevant to you, your business, or your brand. Listen to repeated concerns and then use those findings to respond with knowledge, which is power in the space.
Absolutely. And it's just such a underutilized thing for brands, I think. And there's a whole conversation, Shamim. Look, I'm in the media buying world, right? So as you know, so a lot of this is like, organic is dead, organic communities are dead, all that kind of stuff. I guess from a distribution or actually, sorry, a reach point of view,
Reach
yeah,
perspective.
definitely. But I think it's about it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that communities can be built online, but it takes time and it takes effort, and you need to be able to make sure that you can't just create a Facebook page and go, oh, where is everyone? It does not work like that.
Yeah.
So do you want to maybe just talk a little bit around how to build a community? What are some of the fundamentals around really starting to get a community engaged? I know we've spoken a bit about content. Are there any other tricks that people can use to be able to, start
Yeah,
getting?
look, storytelling comes in a range of different forms. I'm such a huge fan of storytelling. This can be done visually, this can be done through infographics. It really depends on what you're doing, what your service is, or what your brand is. But there are a range of ways to engage people. And obviously, there are campaigns that you can do to gather likes. But if you want to build a long lasting community, it is a long game. So you're providing
Absolutely.
information, you are, providing things that are contextual. You're making people laugh in times where, people are existing in climates of fear and change and uncertainty. Providing value is really important. And I think that that's super underutilized.
I couldn't agree more. I think that value is the one word I think for this whole thing, that no matter what platform or channel you're on, you have to be adding value to your customer. The more value you add, the more that people are going to value your brand, and then you can obviously, they're willing to pay for it. It's a given. In terms of Sham, you mentioned make people laugh and stuff like that. Like if you're doing a social content calendar, is it always going to be about the product, or are you going to bring in other things as well to kind of lighten the mood? How do you decide what content needs to be put out there?
It depends on a few things. Like we look at what is happening out there in the world, and the content calendar is always subject to change based on what is happening outside of your campaigns. So a mix of things, but always relate them back to pillars. What are your key objectives? Always look at those. Don't just post a random meme that has nothing to do with your brand and nothing to do with your campaigns. We always want to align to your overarching objectives, but also provide relevance to the people that are going to be engaging with you. It's a bit of a balance. So I use a range of things to build a content calendar. but always relating back to the overarching objectives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think when it comes to creating content as well, there are so many different ways that we can do it. So like, I think if you were to employ an agency, traditionally they just give you a whole lot of static images or whatever to put onto your newsfeed. But we're seeing the rise of stories and all these other things now. So when you're creating content, how important is it to have different touch points, I guess, on social and different areas of content? Do you create storytelling across multiple different channels and elements? Like how do you go about creating a content plan that actually gets seen?
Yeah, I mean, people exist on a variety of different channels, so it's really about who your target audiences are. I primarily play on Facebook and Instagram, but there are different ways to reach a variety of different people. So and particular stories work differently on each of the platforms. So I'm not going to speak to the platforms that I don't manage and I don't plan.
Fair enough.
But Instagram and Facebook use a variety of different methods of communication. You don't have to tell long form stories and copy. You can use really strong images. You can use really strong infographics that contain standout data points or percentages. You can use videos. You can use Facebook Live. Instagram, there's now Reels. Like, there are so many different ways that you can communicate different messages and really utilize them all. Have a play, see what works, see what your audiences respond to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the thing you mentioned before around content is always subject to change. I 100% agree with that, because what I tend to see a lot is people go, oh, well, here's my month's worth of content done. But if you're not relevant, you're not topical, or if you're an e-com, man, things change all the time. Like we could sell out of something and then, oh, we've got this new stock in. You can use your phone to create engaging off the cuff stuff as well. It doesn't have to be all pre-planned. And I think once people start realizing that, well, social media it's in the now, right? It's relevant to what's happening right this second. So you've got to make sure your brand is aligning with that.
100%.
Sham, in terms of when, you mentioned this a bit before about crisis management stuff, like what is the best way really to, if someone comes onto your page and complains, how do you deal with that? Like, because obviously it's a public forum. Do you respond? What would you suggest? Because obviously this is going to happen to someone's going to get the wrong size or whatever. It's just life.
You respond and you make sure that a human is responding, and you respond with honesty and integrity. You're like, empathetic. Hey, I'm sorry that happened to you. I hear you. I see you. I believe you. Whatever language that is relevant to the product or the service that you're providing. And then move it, if possible, into private messages, because you don't want them providing, personal details in a public forum, like their contact number or whatever, especially if you're dealing with older audiences who can often do that, and you don't want anything, to happen to them in terms of getting scammed. But, let them know that you see them, that you hear them, that you want to rectify this, and make it conversational. Unless they're abusive or it is super high risk and you need to get, legal to check over how you're going to respond. Always respond. If people have a legitimate complaint, you want to rectify it and make things right, and let them know that you're committed to doing that.
It frustrates me with brands, especially if there's comments and things that just aren't. You've got to respond. Like, this is the thing. It's, as we said before, community takes time to build, but it can be all over in a second if you don't respond or you say the wrong thing. So it's about, again, just having empathy. And if you're not that kind of person, get someone who is to do it. Seriously. 100%. Like, I can't stress it enough, because it is the representation of your brand. It's the customer service portal for most people as well. And it's the way that people decide if they align with your brand values. It's 100%. Simple as that.
And if you don't have the answers, that's okay. You just respond. You let them know that they've been seen.
Exactly.
And then you say, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
You don't always have to have the answers right there and then. You can go and check.
Sham, do you do anything, I guess, when it comes to content? So we mentioned this before. Actually, I'll tell you a story. So I was talking to a client yesterday, and their brands, they sell phones. So they have different personas, obviously, right through from, 18-year-old to a 65-year-old. So I guess an 18-year-old is going to be a very different way of communicating, probably going to be on different channels as well, which we're working through that. So there'll be different ways of communicating and content strategies for that, as well as a 65-year-old, you know. So how do you mitigate that, I guess? Like how do you, if you've got a broad range of people who could be buying from you, how do you understand what is going to be the best way to communicate with them? Or do you have different content plays that you put out there? How do you really make sure that you're being as relevant as possible to all those different groups?
I think avoiding, in this instance, stereotypical tropes of how people expect or how you think people expect your brand to talk. So you don't have to try and talk like a teenager. You don't have to, try and talk.
It's going to backfire if you're not,
Yeah.
I'm too old now. So I was talking the other day, like obviously TikTok is a new fad thing. I personally don't like it, but that's something that a whole lot of youngins would be using, and I wouldn't have a clue. And I think that's the thing. Don't talk about things you don't know about, because it's
100%. I know nothing about TikTok. I'm outside of the age range. So when I start playing in that platform, I'm going to be employing someone in the age range that does.
This is it. So, and that's it, guys. And you've got to make sure that it's about understanding socially what people are using, like the words and all that. Like, I'm so out of the loop. I wouldn't know. I only learned what lit was the other day. God, come on. I know, Sham. I'm not down with the kids anymore. But it's really important to make sure you understand, and this is where it goes back to that research and keyword stuff. To understand the words and the language people are using as well, so that you don't get misconstrued, and that obviously that you can connect. It's such an important thing that so many people don't take into account. Sham, is there anything else you want to add? Because I'm conscious of your time, my darling. So
no, I'm good. I'm happy. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the comment section, and I'll answer them.
Fabulous.
Whenever.
I hope everything goes well in Melbourne. You're not doing too crazy. Thank you for joining us today. I know you're extremely busy.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're